All right. It is 11 a.m., so I'm going to get us started. Thank you for those of you who are willing to jump in and introduce yourselves. We will begin by introducing ourselves as well. My name is Katie Diltz. I am one of the associate directors of the ECHO program in the McGrath Institute for Church Life at Notre Dame. And I'll explain ECHO a little bit just because I'll reference it as we're talking. But ECHO is a graduate service program where our students are recent college graduates and they are earning a Master of Arts degree in theology. And they are working in parishes and Catholic schools around the country. And actually, Fall River is one of our newest partners. So we'll be sending a community of ECHO apprentices, parish apprentices, to your diocese beginning next year. So we're very excited about that. But we're also very happy to have the opportunity to talk with you this morning about Lent and evangelization. So rather than a particular, a presentation, we wanted to kind of invite you into a conversation with us. And so my conversation partners this morning are Shadle and Spenser McSorely. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And actually, I've asked them to, as they introduce themselves, to say who they are, what their current role is. And then to, we're talking about, I think the name of our session is Lent in evangelization in the time of COVID. And so I've asked each of them to speak to how has COVID affected your ministry and what are some of the effects that that's had or things you've learned. And we'll jump into that a whole lot more throughout our time. So I don't know, Karen, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm joining you from the beautiful city of Louisville, Kentucky. I'm the Archdiocese and Director of the Office of Worship here. And so my office is involved in preparing archdiocesan liturgies. We set liturgical policy. We assist with the liturgical formation of clergy and also lay people throughout the Archdiocese, 110 parishes that we serve. The main impact of the pandemic on my work, there are so many ways we could answer that question because there has been so much rapid change, particularly with liturgy, as all of you know well. But I think to answer that question on sort of the 50,000 foot level, I think that the pandemic has really forced us to more clearly define who we are as a church or what we're about. I know it's different in every state, but here in Kentucky, the bishops have had some disagreement, to be honest, in good faith with our governor, in some cases with mayors and other local officials who are, to be honest, trying to do the best they can. But have asked the churches to close at various times, have asked the Catholic schools to do online instructions. And they've said things like, you can pray at home, right? God will understand if you pray at home. You can have religion class on Zoom, just like you can have math class. Faith can be taught at home. And of course, these are perfectly true statements to make. But since May, for us, I don't know when it's been for Fall River, the church has declined those requests to stop in-person liturgies. Our Catholic schools opened in August, and at least here our publics have not yet opened. They're still doing online instruction. It's county by county, but by and large, we have implemented risk reduction measures and we're staying open. So we've had to say why, right? We've had to say that yes, prayer can happen anywhere, but that corporate dimension of the liturgy, and especially when we're talking about the Eucharist, that Pauline corporal body, the body of Christ with Christ the head, it's not just a nice idea, but it really is integral to how we worship as Catholics. That body gathers and then we sort of extend our limbs to those who can't be with us at a particular time. So this tasting, touching, this is not just extra adornment to the liturgy. All that sensory stuff is really integral. Zoom liturgy is not sufficient, even though we might use it as a temporary measure to stay in touch. It is not the same. And we've had to articulate the Catholic education, right? It's not just regular education plus religion class. It is exploring all subjects in light of the divine revelation. It's about the care of the whole person. It's exploring what it means to be human. So in my opinion, having to articulate those things in hard conversations and hard decisions has been so good for us. folks like us might like to talk about that stuff all the time, but when have we ever, as a whole society, been challenged as Catholics to state why the body of Christ is essential, why Catholic education is important? We are having these conversations on the news, on the front page of the paper, on social media. So we're being asked to have them more often and with a little bit of spine. And I think that's one of the main impacts that I've observed. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, no, thanks, Karen. I think, yeah, that the incarnational nature of our church is really is huge. As you said, it's integral. So thanks for naming that, and for all the work that you've done too to communicate that and defend it, I guess. Thanks. Yeah, Spence, tell us about yourself.
All right. Yeah. My name is Spenser McSorely. I have been a Catholic since 2005 and serving the church since 2005 as well, because I jumped right into the ECHO program. But I had that 2-year apprentice that the ECHO program allows for in the Diocese of Peoria, Illinois. And after that, I moved to the Diocese of St. Petersburg, Florida, where my wife is from. We both spent some time overseas in Africa for 3 years. And then when we returned, we have been since 2013 in the Diocese of Venice here in Florida as well. So I've been serving the church since 2015. At my current position at Our Lady of the Angels Catholic Church, I am the Director of Religious Education, which involves all the catechesis from the little ones up to the oldest parishioners. And the biggest thing for us here in Florida has just been, I guess, managing. We've kind of seen the whole spectrum of things being really bad, things seeming to lighten up, and taking precautions, but still trying to bring people onto campus as much as possible, especially for the liturgies. And so not just here at our parish, but throughout the whole diocese, I would say there's been a lot of hybrid models of doing things online, but also doing things in person when you can safely. And because of the spectrum that we've experienced, the numbers come and go, but it seems like we're getting a fairly decent response. So I would think the biggest thing is just trying to constantly evaluate where people are and how we can challenge and encourage them to turn to the Lord during this time, to help them stay close to Him during the difficulties they may be experiencing, while not overburdening them or bothering them, or being too lax and feeling like we're letting them off the hook for anything. So it's just the constant evaluation process, I think, and then reaching out and seeing the best ways to do things online as well.
Yeah, thanks, Spence. And in some ways, I feel like that's a great transition to talking about Lent. Have a friend who said we've kind of been in Lent since last March. There's, I think one of the beautiful things that we experience during Lent is, intentional sacrifice, or kind of being a little bit more intentional about the ways that we carry ourselves, the ways that we live our lives, and kind of the ways that our humanity interacts with our spiritual life. And I'm so grateful, Spence, that you named that in terms of the ways that we're engaging with parishioners in these moments, like to take into account that people are going through a lot of really hard things right now, and they might not even have the words to name that, but there's a lot of extra stress. And so, being attentive to the humanity of the people, even as Karen was talking about, like, we are an incarnational church, to be attentive to our humanity, but also, as you named, Spence, kind of calling us all to something higher, to something greater. Yeah, I don't know, Spence, if you have, kind of thoughts about within your parish as you're preparing for Lent, like, what are you planning? How are you kind of holding these things in tension?
Sure, yeah. So with our program, especially for our families, we we switched to a family catechesis model, which normally would have 2 meetings a month, and we've reduced that to 1. And this upcoming month in February is when the whole family's coming. We take turns every other month, families, or just parents coming, and then families coming together. So what we're going to do is pray the Stations of the Cross together, and then talk about just the basics of Lent, remind people. And I feel like I keep using this word this morning, but like there really is a whole range of spectrum in our parish of people who are really into their faith. Could, some of the parents could get up and give a presentation as well as I could, and then others who are like need to be reminded of oh, Ash Wednesday is the day we get ashes. I don't know. Just like so just covering the basics, and we're going to focus on prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, and then give them a handout that has different examples, and then ask them to come together as a family and just select, one thing from each column that you're going to do together and commit to that, and then sign what we call a Lenten family covenant. So it kind of gives them that added commitment that they've agreed to do this together, and they're gonna do that. And along with everything that we do, just trying to focus on the messaging of it, of getting away from that jumping through hoops mentality, and just inviting you to participate in this as something that can really benefit your families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. I mean, just what you're naming of really this kind of focus that I think many of us have taken is that this focus, turning our attention toward the domestic church, and how valuable and important that is. And I know, Karen, that you've done a lot of work kind of reinforcing and supporting the domestic church in your diocese. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the domestic church has always been a concept that the church has talked about, but rarely have we had this sort of total society opportunity to really put that into a practice. A lot of the challenge, as Spence was talking about, the range of people from very engaged in their faith to sort of tangential. One of the things we've worked on is just reducing the barriers to starting some kind of domestic practice. So whether it's the Advent wreath, right? A lot of times families will say, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that right. Okay. And so part of the work I think that we all have before us is to say, there are infinite right ways to do an Advent wreath, right? There's not one, and we as Catholics, we've got mine are all over there, our giant liturgical books, right? With all the rules in them. And so people think naturally that everything has a rule, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. Well, with a lot of those domestic practices that are paraliturgical, or they're popular piety practices, those wonderful cultural Catholicism things, there aren't really right and wrong ways. I mean, there are some ways to do it that people will say that's the way to do it. But really you just got to do it. You just got to dig in and do it. And so just getting people over that barrier of saying, just find some candles. I don't care if they're purple and pink, they can be white. It could be one candle. Who cares? Light it, say a prayer together as a family, like just getting over that hump with some of the people who are not as comfortable with the more formal type of prayer. So for Lent, this being the year of St. Joseph, we're encouraging people to do the St. Joseph table blessing. If you can have a Sunday dinner and try to do that, or even to intentionally practice abstinence from meat or fasting with your family, age appropriate, right? So it could be as simple as providing fun meatless recipes that a family could make together on a Friday evening. Just very simple things like that. I affirm what Spence is saying about simplicity. What are we doing for Lent? As we were talking with the group yesterday, the three of us, I said, even the question, what are you doing for Lent, is a little bit weird. What am I doing for Lent? I'm doing the same thing I always do. I'm doing prayer, I'm doing fasting, I'm doing almsgiving. Those are the basics. And, you know, in a year like this, getting back to the basics is a winner. That's a winning policy. So I support simple and back to basics kind of stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead, Spence.
As an example to, like you mentioned, Karen, the Advent wreath, and also that there's no right way to do stuff. I see that all the times in our families where, because we are oftentimes a church of rules, it's like, and Americans want to do things perfectly. And like, well, I'm an expert in my field, but like, if I don't know how to do something exactly how it's supposed to be done, I'm not even going to venture towards that. And so just what my wife has done for our family is every Lent she takes a vase that we have that's got kind of a wide rim so that she can reach down into it and put stones at the bottom. And then she finds some empty branches just to show kind of the barren nature of the whole time of going deeper in prayer and fasting, giving things up, small sacrifices, if you will. And then since we have little guys, we have 4 boys under 9 and under. She in recent years has cut out different either prayer hands or I forget what the symbol is for fasting, and then coins for almsgiving. Puts those on all over the branches, and the boys take turns each night taking one off and putting it in our rice bowl, and then we pray, and it's just a reminder of those 3 things that we're doing, and also, you know, that this isn't a time of celebration. This is a time of desert, of going a bit deeper. So just one example of something you can do in the home or tell others about, or I'm sure many of you have your own ideas.
Great. Thank you. One of the things that the 3 of us were talking about yesterday was sort of this balance of, in COVID, having to kind of strike a balance between, virtual programming, live streaming things, in-person programming, kind of providing resources for people to use at home. One of the things that I have been really pushing hard with some of the people that I work with, that I talk with, is really, I think many of us have become very good at live streaming things, but to actually take time to plan events for a virtual medium. And so, for example, I think of when we have Stations of the Cross. We can, if you've got live streaming set up in your church, you could live stream that from church if people are, kind of moving around to the stations. You could also take photos of the stations in your church. Use your phone. They take good, nice pictures. And, create, share your screen and create a slideshow or something where you can, kind of give people that close-up image that they might not otherwise have, or, print out the pictures, create a nice little booklet and send it to parishioners. Here's our Stations of the Cross for our parish. Things like that, to kind of be attentive to doing things in a new medium, and not just kind of copying and pasting the things that, well, we've always done this, and so here's how we're going to do it. We're just going to live stream it for people. So being thoughtful about, like, what does it look like for us to do this virtually, or to send it home for people? Because, speaking of our humanity, a lot of people are spending a lot of time looking at screens. And so it's so helpful to give them, very hands-on resources that they can use at home, that they can have a piece of paper that they're touching, they don't have to look at a screen to access. Yeah. I don't know if, Karen or Spencer, you have thoughts on that too.
Yeah, just to add to that, one thing that our youth director thought of, and maybe this is obvious to everybody, but it didn't occur to me at first, is that when you're doing something like that, you can still live stream it on something like Zoom, like we're doing now. And then with the share screen option, like maybe you begin with it focused on father or deacon, whoever's leading the prayers, doing the introductory prayer. But then when you go to at least in our church, when you go over to the stations, you can't see it real clearly. So if you've taken pictures beforehand, then that's the time you share the picture to the screen, and you kind of have your own little production there. And it's not going to look like something on EWTN or elsewhere where it's, they're going to see your computer screen at times, but it's a way of engaging the people a little more closely, a little more deeply, where they can actually see where the deacon or priest has walked over to the station. They can see the station. If you have prayers for them to read, you can put those up on screen, or like Katie said, even mail things out to people, because that's another nice way that's thoughtful, that, hey, we're thinking of you, we wish you could be here, type of gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree that, Zoom is great for us, but it's not for everyone. And we have to remember that there is a whole segment. We have a very active diocesan newspaper, comes out every week. It's very, very professionally level done in-house. And, not every diocese is blessed with that, but we have certain people for whom that newspaper that they get every Thursday is their only connection right now, and has been for the past year. And so I think we are well served to remember that there is a community that is not engaging in virtual anything. Okay. And that's going to be a higher percentage of our Catholics, most likely, than in the general population. We got a lot of those people. Again, COVID is blessing us because that is true all the time. Hello. It's not just true during a pandemic. It's especially, apparent to us during the pandemic, but we have to remember that this community, the sick and shut-ins, are all the time. Okay. So one of my experiences that I had was, after we shut our churches last March, and then we reopened them in May, and I was among the first to go back because I don't have a lot of restrictions, health restrictions or age restrictions. I was among the first. There were so few people there. There were, the church was a quarter full. And my thought went to who's not here, right? Who's not here. And my thought was, well, I should be thinking that all the time, right? I should always walk into the church, even if it's full, and say, who's not here? And that's the body of Christ reaching out to the rest of the body of Christ that can't be physically with us. And so in any kind of programming we do, whether it is the Eucharist, celebration of the Eucharist, whether it's Stations of the Cross, whatever it is, I think we have to think broadly about the body of Christ and know that, Zoom is not going to be a long-term solution for us as a church. And as a short-term necessary solution, it needs to be one of many strategies, I think.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who are currently not here for health and safety reasons, and and at least in our diocese, we continue to have a dispensation, but we also know that hopefully someday in the not too distant future, when things clear up, we're going to have a lot of people to call back to invite home, who won't just come streaming through the doors once we take the ropes off the pews and everything's open. I don't know if either of you have thoughts about this work of evangelization and how we can continue to do this very important work in the time of COVID, and particularly during Lent. Like, how can what our parishes are doing during Lent kind of facilitate this work of evangelization?
Yeah, when Karen was talking about who's not here, I was what came to mind is how on Ash Wednesday, somewhat like Christmas and Easter, you look around and you're like, oh, there's people here that aren't often here. And with evangelization, that's such a great time to express to them how welcome and how wonderful it is. And you might, or I would hesitate to say, like, why aren't you here the rest of the year? but to say, have something prepared of what you could invite them to come back again for. And so whether it's, if they are coming in person, something printed out that you can put in their hands, the ushers can hand out at the doors, that tells them what's going on in the parish. Since those folks have come in person, it could be something as simple as, here's what we have going on in person. If you're able to have liturgies, Stations of the Cross during Lent, what time the Easter services are, that sort of thing. And I'm recalling from an earlier conference like this that we had in our diocese earlier this year with John Roberto, just talking about the multifaceted way of reaching out to people. So on that same card, you could have in-person opportunities, but then you could also show your website, things you'd think people would know automatically, but maybe they don't, or your Facebook page, or if you have a Twitter account or whatever else, social media. I'm not a huge social media fan, but for some people, that's the only way you're going to connect with them. It's like, so to have that online or on the card, so they can reach out to you online. And then also, even when you're programming, to consider, okay, we're doing something in person, how can we connect to people online? Also, how can we connect in those real tangible ways? Like if we're going to in person go through a resource, a prayer book or a devotional book of some type during Lent as a parish, and we're handing those out, then that person can take it home and feel connected, even if they never reach back, but provide multiple avenues for them to reach back in person, online. Even perhaps, I know, Katie, you've mentioned this in the past of some kind of a phone tree, reaching out and connecting to people, just seeing how they are. And then if they have that, then, or that handout could even have some way of signing up to be on the phone tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that like personal connection, I think, makes such a huge difference. And as you alluded, Spenser, talked about how a lot of parishes at the beginning of all of this, made phone calls to parishioners, whether it was every parishioner who's registered or parishioners over a certain age. And I don't know how many have kept up that practice, but it strikes me as you're talking, Spence, that Lent could be a time to reach back out to people and say, how are you doing? What are there resources that we can, we gave out this book on Ash Wednesday and the first Sunday of Lent. Did you get one? Can we drop one off? Can I put one in the mail for you? But to make sure that we're still kind of keeping in touch with everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add that with when it comes to programming and evangelization, I kind of see two categories, right? The one is you see where people are going, what is popular, where are the people, and you try to enhance that and use it as a tool for evangelization. And then in that category is kind of the Ash Wednesday that Spence was talking about. And then the other is, where do we think that people should be that they're not, and how can we encourage them to get there? Maybe the sacrament of reconciliation might be in that kind of category. So, I think we do a good job of saying, you need to be here. This is why, go do that thing. I think we could be stronger at enhancing the things that are already popular and using them more as tools for evangelization. So, Ash Wednesday, who knows why it's popular? It's not a holy day of obligation, but guess what? You don't need to say that. That's okay. You can just be happy that they are there, instead of, poking fun of the fact that, maybe this is more further down the list of important holy days. Doesn't really matter. Fish fries are another great opportunity for evangelization. However, you might be doing them this year, who knows? But those are deeply ingrained parts of Catholic culture. They are real in the flesh experiences of Lenten abstinence and almsgiving. And so, celebrating those things, knowing that people are there and being kind Christian, in our welcoming in the way that we do those events. Ash Wednesday, it rivals Christmas in my area in terms of participation. People like to post on social media. I don't know how Bishop DeCunha is doing it in your diocese this year. I know we got the instructions from Rome about sprinkling on the forehead instead of doing the cross, and that's what we'll be doing here. So it'll be a little different. People may show up and want the hashtag, as we call it, and they may, I don't know. I'm kind of nervous actually about Ash Wednesday this year. I don't want people to get upset that they're not getting their ash tag. But in a normal year, let's say post-COVID, we need to be making Ash Wednesday like our best liturgical effort ever. Like if they come and see the best lectors and there's a killer homily that's short and relevant and and the music is great. Like we need to put a lot of effort into that. I know a lot of you aren't music and liturgy folks. I didn't mention that my background is in music, sacred music. I'm an organist. And so that part of the liturgy is very important to me. So we need to put as much effort into Ash Wednesday as we do as Christmas, I think, because it's that important, even though it's not like a high ranking holy day, it is that important in terms of evangelization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lent is one of those funny things that I know Catholics who, people who grew up Catholic and like are kind of Catholic now, they don't really go to mass. So I baptize my kids, but we haven't done anything else, who still give things up for Lent. Like, why are you doing that? I mean, great, but like, so there's something about this practice that really speaks to people. And, and again, as I said, we've been in sort of a perpetual Lent for the last year or so. And so maybe we encourage people to like be gentle with your fasting. Maybe you're fasting in a lot of ways this year. But how can you pray? How can you give alms? How can you, maybe there are sacrifices that you can make that also take into account the sacrifices that are already being required of you that you didn't volunteer for. But heck, isn't that the Christian life, Yeah,
I don't know that anyone last Ash Wednesday decided they were going to give up toilet paper for Lent, but a lot of us ended up making that sacrifice. And so you're right, there is a lot of sort of suffering that was foisted upon us that we didn't choose. But I think that using this as a time to give something up to purify your life, like that is, like you said, is deeply ingrained in our culture, even for what we might consider, non-practicing or marginally practicing Catholics. Lent rolls around and they're ready to jump in. And so I think we need to, some of those things that we think of like being basic level Lent, like you don't really understand the theology of Lent. You're just giving up candy bars or whatever. Let's work with that instead of, trying to heap piles of spirituality onto it. Let it be its own spiritual practice in its simplicity. I think that's a great way to go.
Yeah. I love what both of you are saying about acknowledging where sacrifices have already been made throughout this entire pandemic, and using this time of Lent to then redirect. So why is it, okay, we already have sacrifices. You don't necessarily need to heap more on top of that as much as just recognize it. Maybe you as a family, this isn't the best year to give alms, or maybe for you, for whatever reason, it has been a good year and that's an area to focus. But to encourage that kind of examination and reflection, and then also to point people as to why do we do these things. So even if you feel like, I don't know if I can add one more sacrifice, that can be perfectly fine. You've given up other things, but redirect, I guess, your gaze as to who you're sacrificing those things for this Lent, and put the gaze back on Christ, because I think really when talking to families, parents, people on our Bible studies, on the Zoom Bible studies, those who are really growing spiritually during this time, it's been those who have been able to put things in proper perspective and have those sacrifices be for the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Spence, what you're saying is reminding me kind of like when I went back to church and I realized he wasn't there. The pandemic, we're all suffering kind of as a society together through this, but it reminds us that suffering is happening all the time. Like 2020, we think that everything was fine and then suffering entered the world in March of 2020. Well, that's not accurate. There's suffering all the time. And so I think it's making us more aware maybe that, job loss and the financial struggles and health struggles, like those are things that are going to continue after we're all vaccinated and, this is over. And so that level of awareness, that empathy that we're feeling for each other, that can continue in the same way that our concern for those who aren't physically in the church at our programs or at our liturgies can continue beyond this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the best things that we can offer people is really to help them create space at the beginning of Lent to take an inventory, to say, what is it? What am I experiencing? What do I need? Where do I feel called? I think that at least my own experience in the pandemic is like, it's triage. I'm attending to the things that I need to attend to, and I don't have as much time and space for really that solitude, even though, I'm spending a lot more time at home alone because I'm working from home, but it's not necessarily time in solitude, to be able to check in with myself and say, how am I doing? Where do I feel God calling me? What is it that I need to attend to in my spiritual life? And, that can happen with a quick recorded video from the pastor or the DRE or anybody on the parish staff or a parishioner that can be shared. It can be a printed inventory to say, spend time with this. You can facilitate small groups on whatever platform, Zoom or whatever it is that you use to kind of lead people through that process. But really, allowing people to check in with themselves and say, like, oh yeah, where am I? We've been at this for a year, and that's a long time. And, we can do this. People do hard things, and this is harder for some of us than it is for others. But nonetheless, I need to check in with myself and with God and kind of figure out where we are and where God is leading me in these next 40 days. What do I want to offer to God during this season? But that kind of individual attention is sometimes really hard to facilitate. But again, I think that's one of the things that we're learning is, when people aren't just showing up for our events and kind of being part of the crowd, we've learned that we have to be more intentional with individual relationships or, sort of, well, okay, I, as the director of faith formation, am going to attend to my catechists who, even though they might not be meeting in person, are going to attend to the families in their class, that we can delegate the work. It doesn't mean that one person needs to attend to 10,000 people, but I can attend to 10 people who are attending to 10 other people. And, those kinds of relationships, that kind of community is really what makes a difference, what helps to sustain people.
Yeah, I think that concept of delegation is so important because anytime a new liturgical season rolls around, or you're going to be yourself as DREs or youth directors or people in charge of the liturgy at your parish, pastoral associates, if you're going to be adding more to your plate, it's also a time to look at your own work and say, okay, what can I hand off? And that's something I haven't always done well in the past. So I'm learning, what can I give to catechists who maybe, are looking for something because they aren't as involved this year in our hybrid model. So what can I give to them so that I don't get overwhelmed? Because all of you have been through this pandemic and supporting others and taking on new roles and new responsibilities and probably added hours and whatnot. So so as we are approaching, towards the tail end of this school year, for lack of a better word, in the church life, don't put too much on your plate. See where you can hand things off. And on top of that too, I think it's worth asking ourselves as people that others turn to, what are we personally doing for Lent? And to consider the sacrifices you've already made, and maybe don't bite off more than you can chew, but to really consider something that will put away the noise and the distraction of our lives that we oftentimes, at least I know myself, fill with media and whatnot, and pick up a book on the life of Christ or whatever it might be and say, this is what I'm going to get through this Lent. Maybe it's a one-day retreat, just to have some quiet and to reconnect with the Lord. Whatever it is, I think it's well worth taking some time to think about yourselves as well, because we can't give to others what we don't have.
I would just very quickly add too that I don't think it is too soon to look to the future, right? To look beyond the pandemic, to ask yourself what programs are successful, what programs can be sunsetted, for lack of a better term, and also to just know that it's going to be a bit of a struggle. I think I'm not being too pessimistic to say it's going to be a bit of a struggle to get people back. It's going to be a slow process. And so if we expect folks to come back the way they were before and even better, then we need to really have outstanding evangelization, outstanding compassion, outstanding liturgies, outstanding programs. And so, it's not too soon to look to the future and say, what is outstanding that we're going to amplify so that people need and want to be with us. So I'm thinking ahead to Lent 2023 and Lent 2024 and saying, what's going to work for us then? What have I learned from this experience that has changed how I'm going to do the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to leave a little bit of time for you all to ask us any questions that you have, and I invite you to send those into the chat. And while you're kind of thinking, I want to ask if the three of us, I know Karen, you actually sort of already named this, but you're welcome to add more. But what is it that you have learned during this experience of the pandemic, or maybe not even something you've learned, but a grace that you've received or something that you've experienced in your ministry that you hope to carry on, to keep going with, something that you hope to take with you. So yeah, I don't know, Karen, I know you already sort of named that as you're thinking ahead to future Lents, but is there anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, just very simply that, simplicity. I mean, my goodness, the number of piano recitals and soccer games that I haven't gone to has made so much space in my life for one other wonderful thing. So I think simplifying both as an individual, like cutting my schedule down to the bare essentials. And again, sort of what I said, like, what are the outstanding things that we do? Let's just do those better. Cut out everything else. I think there's something to that. And I think we can look at that individually, as our parishes, as the church in general.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. That act of pruning, both in our personal lives and in our ministerial lives. And yeah, it's a natural process. And I actually think it's a great gift that we've had to kind of pare down all of the things that we're doing to say, what's most essential? And gosh, how are we filling our time? Like, why was I working every night of the week? What was I doing? And do I need to be doing that? Does our parish need all of these things? Or, like Karen said, can we kind of focus our energy on the most effective things? And certainly, we have room now for new and other things. So, yeah, Spence, is there anything that you would add?
Yeah, for me, I would say moving to the family model, I was surprised by how much families and parents expressing how much they enjoyed the time together. And I think reflecting a lot on what Karen was saying, starting to realize just how busy they were, but taking the time and growing in the faith together. I think at the same time we got feedback that like a bit of feeling overwhelmed on all the content. So we're going to look at more of a hybrid model of how to get, the content taught by catechists here at the parish once things return to normal, but not lose that family aspect in the home, sending home and making it clear at the very beginning that they have a key role in this process, and that this is like a part of the program, to really keep encouraging the domestic prayer life and faith life of the family, and letting people see that it's possible. There's not a wrong way to do an Advent wreath, for instance, or whatever it might be. That I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
Absolutely. I know you had said this yesterday when we spoke, Spence, but that, you sent, religious ed kind of moved into the house or into the home, and some parents were, full steam ahead, and others were like, whoa, I'm not ready for this. And I think, we can help build parents' confidence to say, you're capable of this. You have it in you. I mean, the name of our program, ECHO, comes from the Greek word for catechesis, which means to echo or to resound. We're all like doing this work of catechesis. We are echoing what has already been placed in our own hearts. And so, God has provided us. I mean, certainly we've got textbooks and things, we've got resources that can help aid us, but we're all capable of doing this work. So
yeah, and I think the family's got a chance to see that even if you have the greatest textbook, it means so much more when you have shared experiences as family. So yeah. I see Kathy was talking about confirmation, and I had to chuckle because we just yesterday were having the same conversation in our office about how are we holding them accountable. I don't know if we had two options just for youth group. You could be in person or online, and but everything for confirmation was in person and spaced, and people who haven't been coming to those we're communicating with. And I don't know if they're just not reading or if they are trying to play dumb or whatever, for lack of a better way of putting it, that they're like, but I have the online option. We're like, that's just for the prerequisite, it's not for confirmation. So we're still working through that ourselves. I guess the only thing I can share constructively about that is to speak compassionately, kind of like speaking softly, but carry a big stick, speak compassionately and say, like, I know this year's been hard, and then just being very clear, but this is what's required, and we have confirmation again next year, and we won't hold it against you if it doesn't get done, but we want to be sure that they're prepared for what they're going to receive. I guess that would be my best advice, is just communicating to those people in that way, in a way that they'll want to come back if they don't make it happen this year, but being very clear about what the requirements are.
Yeah, we have that come up quite a lot as well with confirmation, even in non-pandemic years. And I urge compassion as well. I always remind people, the requirements for receiving the sacraments, any of them, is your desire to receive the sacrament. It's not an essay that you wrote. So, I would encourage you to ask yourself, what are the things I want the children who are preparing for confirmation to learn? Have they learned that? Which is different from, did they turn in the work? And when you're in a school setting, the grades might be affected, but the desire for the sacrament is there, in which case, they should be confirmed. So it's a matter of, if they need to be punished in that sense by not getting a good grade, well, fine, but that shouldn't affect their ability to receive the sacrament. So that's usually where we come down on issues like that, if that gives you some practical help.
Yeah, we've used that focus before too, about desire, and we say, like yes, there are certain, we need a baptismal certificate, we need this, we need that, but the most important thing is we need to see that you truly want this, and the way you do that is being here with us, and if this time, she mentioned they're on Zoom and Canvas, if this time for a Zoom meeting does not work for you, what does work? And trying to, because of this time of year, create a little more flexibility maybe than in other years. Maybe you can get one catechist to have, for safe environment reasons, maybe you need two online with a kid, but to have a separate session if that's what it takes, and offering that. And I found even just the willingness to be a bit flexible and to offer alternatives can but get help with that, because otherwise you'll burn yourself out. But just the willingness, oftentimes people will, they'll come around and they'll say, well, actually we probably can, make the normal time. Because if they really want it, they'll make sure to be there.
Exactly. But yeah, checking in to say, help me understand what is happening that you're not attending to these things. Like to actually be curious about what is happening with them. And I understand that's a lot when you've got a lot of people. And I led confirmation prep for 5 years, and I struggled with it. And had that kid who like wasn't showing up to anything, and talked to my pastor, and he met with the family, and and that student was received confirmation with his class. And I was a little miffed about it because he didn't do all the things I wanted him to do. But like, who am I to prevent somebody from receiving the gift of the Holy Spirit?
Let's just acknowledge too that this is the worst possible age for everything. So the fact that they're not listening to you is totally normal. I have a 12-year-old boy. He's in that right now. And so the fact that, you are planting seeds that will later, sprout fruit, just go with that, and so that's why I say, really, really err on the side of compassion and understanding, because they're going to resist everything, because that's what 12-year-olds do. I don't know, 12, 13, whatever it is in your diocese, 14, something like that. It's awful. They're the worst.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. And Margaret has a question about, she mentions liking Spence family Lenten family covenant. I don't know if Karen or Spence, if you have, things that you've heard of that you're aware of that parishes are doing, especially as, we reach out to the people who, say they're Catholic, but aren't coming to Mass. And especially now, they might be live streaming Mass, they might not. But how we're kind of doing this work of outreach this Lent.
Yeah, another thing that comes to mind is showing or producing some way for them to be able to do the stations at home. I know with our little guys, we have little cards that we've created and just place them all around the living room, and then we have a procession. And I think all we do is say what each station is, and then we genuflect and say it's not coming to mind right now, but the prayers of just the short prayer and response of each station, because by your holy cross you redeemed the world. And then we move along, and I think it's every 3 or every 4 we sing Jesus Remember Me. It's like, and with doing that with little ones, we're able to move it quick enough. So that's one thing we do as a family that I'm gonna add to what we're giving as our kind of packet of handouts for the families. But yeah, I think and then CRS Rice Bowl is another one, Catholic Relief Services. It's a basic thing, but just teaching kids. When Karen was talking about the pandemic kind of woke us up to a lot of suffering that occurred in 2020, but there's suffering going on all the time. And I don't think we should just emphasize that overseas it's nothing but suffering. There's also so much beauty and joy in those different places. But I love how CRS, in the those who are familiar with it, with the Rice Bowl comes a calendar, and every week with the Lenten meal, they highlight a different country and a different person sharing a little bit about their story. And it's so beautiful to see our brothers and sisters throughout the world in different places who remind us that the body of Christ is so much larger. So I would encourage that one as well. I don't know, any other thoughts from the panel or anyone else?
Mm-hmm.
I thought of 3 quick and dirty, kind of very practical things that we've done. One, with almsgiving. My house is virtually cashless, and I imagine a lot of folks, millennials and that age group, we don't have cash. So we always get the rice bowl at school and it sits in its flattened form on the counter until it's due. And then we go, oh crap. And then we write a check. So what I've done the last couple of years, now that my son is older, is I've made him research an agency or a cause or something that he's passionate about, and we give to that as our almsgiving, rather than we still do a check for CRS. But the idea of, I always wanted to have the house where we had the rice bowl and we put our money in it, but we just never had money in our hands. We use credit cards. So I don't know if I should do that or admit to doing that, but we never have cash, right? So having, if you have older children or teenagers that can help identify a need and give money, I think that's helpful. The St. Joseph table blessing that I mentioned earlier, this being the year of St. Joseph, we're putting that on cards and making that available so that, family meal time can be a little more meaningful during Lent. We do not have a dinner as a family together. Again, something I shouldn't admit publicly every night, but we try to do it on the weekends when we have a little more time. And then the other thing is social media accountability threads. We always do an Ash Wednesday, what are you doing for Lent? What are you giving up? An accountability post on our Archdiocesan page so that people can just post. And there are hundreds of people saying, I'm doing this for Lent. I'm doing this, what they're giving up or what their penitential practices that they're going to add. And then we do a weekly check-in. How are you doing on your thing? Just as a way of engaging some of that 82% that are, marginally engaged, but might be interested in accountability kind of thing. So those are just a couple of ideas.
Yeah. And, what comes to mind for me is kind of, as we think about this work of evangelization, if you're familiar with the different thresholds of evangelization, attending to people in these different thresholds. So looking at, we have our full intentional disciples. What can we provide for these people? How can we help them to go deeper? Are there small groups? Are there, in the McGrath Institute, we have a series that we're kind of relaunching during Lent on the St. John's Bible, which is an illuminated manuscript Bible that was done in the last 20 years. Kind of how can we use resources to attend to people who are fully committed and want to go deeper? But then on the other end of the spectrum, how can we just build trust? How can we simply help people to have a good relationship with our church? Are there, again, attending to the human needs of people? Just because Karen was talking about credit cards. Are there budgeting things? Like some people are really struggling financially. Can we host something about budgeting for our parish and open it to the community? Are there, is there a local, social worker, psychologist, somebody who can help with parenting? Are parents really struggling right now? What are these kinds of things that we can do, the resources that we can provide, not just for our parishioners, but also for the community to build trust? Whether it's, again, it could be hosted online, it could be hosted virtually, it could be hosted in person if you have the ability and the space to accommodate that safely. But yeah, kind of looking at those thresholds. I'm not going to try and name all of them, but to be able to say okay, people who are curious, who want to learn a little bit more, can we have some sort of entry level, some very kind of basic introductory. Alpha is a course that a lot of parishes use. These kinds of things. Can we attend to people in these different thresholds and rather than just one size fits all, here's the thing that you should use and, figure it out. If not, well, good luck. Yeah, so kind of that for me has been sort of a helpful, in terms of thinking of evangelization, kind of thinking through where are people and how can I meet them where they are. We are at our time. I don't know if anyone has any closing thoughts or closing questions or anything else. Otherwise, I'm happy to say thank you all for being with us, and especially thank you to Karen and Spence for joining us. They are people that we know well from our work in the McGrath Institute, and this is the work that we do. The McGrath Institute really is, coming from Notre Dame. It's our outreaching arm from the university to the church. We want to be in conversation with you all, and so please reach out if there are ways that we can continue to support you. And like I said, I'm excited because ECHO is going to be partnering with the Diocese of Fall River next year. So we'll have some contact, but mcgrath.nd.edu. come check us out, but know that we want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories, and we want to be able to support you in the work that you're doing. And Karen and Spence, I'm so grateful for our conversation and for all of the work that you are doing in Louisville and in Sarasota, right? You're in Sarasota now.
Yeah, Diocese of Venice. Yeah,
right. I knew you were in Venice, but I was like, where are you actually? Wonderful. Well, thank you all.